The Raiders have announced who their starting quarterback for the 2024 season is going to be, but was it the right decision? That plus more comes up on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for August 19th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of you, Raider Nation, and because of my man Ari, who does a great job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, and we're sounding good. We appreciate him, and we shout him out. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit him up there. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line if you want to be a part of the show, 707-654-4693. With the announcement of the starting quarterback for 2024, you can imagine a ton of feedback. So your calls and texts coming up in segment number 3, and a lot of feedback about the starting quarterback in 2024, both good and bad. That's coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll deep dive into that quarterback and what he brings to the table and how he can help this team, win games, obviously, because that's what's most importantly, but, how they can get off to a good start of the season, which I think is the most important factor here, and I think that played a heavy role into Antonio Pierce's decision in who the starting quarterback is going to be. And here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as I always do, we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Tell you more about them later on in the show. But off top, got to go ahead and jump right into it. On Sunday, we met with Antonio Pierce by way of Zoom, as we have done the last couple of weeks following the preseason games. The Raiders lose 27-12 to the Cowboys on Saturday in a very lackluster game, almost a sleepy game, I'd like to say. As I did the pregame show and the postgame show, wasn't a whole lot to get excited about. You saw Aiden O'Connell lead the team to a touchdown scoring drive, and Gardner Minshew didn't. Gardner Minshew didn't look very good in the game as far as I was concerned. Looked like he was pressing a lot. So when I left Allegiant Stadium on Saturday night, my thoughts, as people had told me, hey, what do you think? Who's going to be the starting quarterback, Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell? I thought it was going to be Aiden O'Connell. Well, Antonio Pierce, he met with us on Sunday and started the whole press conference off with an opening statement on who's going to be the quarterback. This was AP's decision. Here it is. Check it out.
I'm going to go ahead and start off. Gardner Minshew is going to be the starting quarterback the 2024 season. Myself, Telesco, and Luke Getzey discussed it this morning. A lot of things went into it. It wasn't based off of last night. There's a lot of factors. So we feel like Gardner gives us the best opportunity to get off to a fast start, and that's what we're going with. We support him. Our team's behind it. Our staff's behind it. Our organization's behind it.
So that was the opening statement right there from Antonio Pierce. Gardner Minshew is the starting quarterback, and you heard what he said. It had nothing to do, or it didn't have everything to do with what happened on Saturday night. It was a collective, right? What he saw in OTAs, what they saw in training camp, what they've seen in the games, and just the overall feeling to get this team going in the right direction to get the 2024 season started. So again, I was pretty surprised by the decision. I thought it was going to be Aiden O'Connell, and it's funny, I've gone back and forth multiple times throughout the course of this competition of who the guy is going to be, who the guy should be, right? There's a difference in that, who I think he should be and who I think that the Raiders are going to make the decision with. So I went back and forth multiple times, but you hear AP announce that Gardner Minshew is the guy. So what ultimately went into the decision for Antonio Pierce?
Yeah, experience, the operation, the processing, just everything we saw in practice. Some of it showed up in the games. A lot of stuff we can get better at. I don't think anything here is a finished product, but based off of where we want to go in the first quarter of the season, we feel like Gardner gives us the best opportunity.
So there's AP on what went into the decision again to name Gardner Minshew the starting quarterback for 2024. And, now that he knows who the quarterback's going to be, now they have a whole week coming up of practice where Minshew's going to be running with the ones. It's not going to be split. It's all going to be Minshew. Luke Getzey now is going to be able to, build this offensive scheme around Minshew, his strengths, and be able to put him in a position, hopefully, to succeed, right, and be able to get the ball to the playmakers that the Raiders have, and they have plenty of playmakers, as we mentioned multiple times. So what would Antonio Pierce like to see from Minshew moving forward now that he's been named the starting quarterback for the Raiders?
Yeah, well, one, his personality is infectious, his energy is infectious, his leadership is infectious. Things of improvement, footwork, in the pocket, staying on script. There is some magic about him when he does break the pocket and does his thing, but there's a lot of times where, if the first, second read is there, we got to let it rip. So he understands that, and more importantly, taking care of the football.
So obviously he's got some work to do, right? AP believes in him, but there's some work that he's got to do. He's got to make sure he makes some good decisions, got to clean up some of the areas of concern that we've documented and talked about throughout the course of this whole competition. And, he's a veteran. He's a veteran that AP is trusting is going to be able to get this team off to a strong start. So the last soundbite I want you to hear from Antonio Pierce is just about the reaction by both quarterbacks when AP gave them, the word on who's going to be the starting quarterback. So what was the reaction to the decision by both quarterbacks?
First and foremost, man, those two gentlemen are professionals. The way they've handled this competition has really resonated throughout our building, especially our staff and our team. They've cheered each other on. They've been good teammates. They brought out the best version of each other in practices and I think in the games. They both took it on the chin like a champ. And I told them, just both be ready. We saw in the National Football League, you never know. But Aiden is a young player that has a tremendous upside that I think will still be a starter here in this league. Excuse me, not think. Will be a starter at some point in this league, if it's this year or next year, but he will play in games. And I think, Gardner's done a good job of kind of like, being that older presence because he's played, a couple years in the league and he's been through some adversity. So that's been good for Aiden.
And I think what AP said right there about, you got to be ready, got to tell Aiden O'Connell to be ready as well, because there was 66 quarterbacks that played in 2023. Right, that started games in 2023. So there's a good chance that both quarterbacks are going to end up seeing plenty of action this season for the Raiders. So Aiden O'Connell's got to be ready, and I have no doubt about it. He's going to be ready when he's called upon, if he's called upon. And look, it could be because of injury, it could be because of struggle, it could be a combination of both, whatever the case may be. And that's what it was in 2023 across the National Football League. Again, over 66 quarterbacks played and started games in 2023 is wild to think. The Raiders had 3, the Browns had 5, right? I mean, so that just tells you right there that you've got to be able to, have your backups ready to go when called upon, because, well, they're going to, they're probably going to get that call, as you saw in 2023. So we'll talk more and deep dive more into the quarterback decision and what the quarterback Gardner Minshew brings to the table coming up in segment number 2. But also another concern and something I was focused in on Saturday's game versus the Cowboys was what the Raiders' run defense was going to look like. They gave up 142 yards on the ground to the Vikings in preseason game number 1, gave up 132 yards on the ground to the Dallas Cowboys, which is a concern. So this Raiders defense that I've been talking about, saying how good it's going to be, all of a sudden can't stop the run. That's going to be a problem. I don't care if you can get to the quarterback or not. If you can't stop the run, nobody's going to drop back to pass because they're not going to need to. So here's Antonio Pierce on the Raiders' struggle to stop the run.
Yeah, it's still an issue. I mean, it wasn't good enough. I think over 114 yards in the first half. Again, not the standard. A lot of leaky yards. We're not getting off blocks. We're not being violent enough up front. We're too talented, too skilled, too much length to stay blocked. And again, that's something I know our coach is going to harp on an individual, and we will continue to work on that. But that's not the standard. It's now been 2 weeks of it, and obviously we got to do more in practice.
So there's AP right there talking about the Raiders, what they need to do defensively to stop the run, and how that's got to be a huge emphasis. I mean, look, you got the Chargers coming up week 1. You've got the Ravens coming up week 2. Both those teams are going to try to run the ball, and run the ball some more, right? And so if you can't stop the run, it doesn't matter how many bloodthirsty Pirates you got on that defensive line that are going to try to get to the quarterback, because there's not going to be anybody dropping back, right? Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers are going to want to run the rock. We know that. And, of course, Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens and company with Derrick Henry now in the mix are going to want to run the ball as well. So there's no reason to put, the quarterback in harm's way and have him drop back if the Raiders can't stop the run. And really in week 2, it's going to be even that much more difficult going up against the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. We saw what Trey Lance looked like on Saturday night with the Cowboys, right? Trey Lance in the zone read was, it was working. It was effective against the Raiders defense. And I know that, the starters only played for a while, right? The defensive line didn't play for the whole first half, but a lot of the Raiders defense did play for the first half. So they've got to be able to stop the run and that zone read, or it's going to be a long, long season for the silver and black. So that's definitely something that I'm concerned about moving forward. Also, one more little nugget here I wanted to pass along here in segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, news and notes of the day. On Saturday, it was announced that the Raiders signed linebacker Jackson Mitchell. They claimed him off waivers. He was originally signed as an undrafted free agent by the Panthers out of UConn. He was released by the Panthers on Friday, and the Raiders picked him up on Saturday. And a part of the reason why I think that they picked him up is Tommy Eichenberg, their 5th-round pick out of Ohio State, the linebacker. He didn't participate in that open practice. He didn't actually, going back to week 1 of the preseason against Minnesota, he didn't play. In their open practice that they had at Legion Stadium, he didn't play. He was out there. You can see he had a leg compression on his leg. He had like a sleeve on his leg, and then he didn't play on Saturday versus the Dallas Cowboys. So here's Antonio Pierce talking about what Tommy Eichenberg's been going through.
Yeah, he's dealing with a lower leg injury. Hoping to have him back here. He won't play in the preseason game, but hopefully they have him back by the regular season.
So there's AP real quick on Tommy Eichenberg. I don't know how serious it is, but when I see them going out and claiming a linebacker off waivers, I'm starting to think that, okay, Tommy might have a setback where he might not be available for quite a while. I don't know what that means, right? Is he going to be available sometime this season? Is he going to not be available at all this season? I'm not too sure. Obviously, that's something to pay attention to. Tommy Eichenberg's a young talent that I think is going to be a really good player, but dealing with a lower leg injury is probably not very good, right? And again, when you go out and make a move for a linebacker like they did with Jackson Mitchell, kind of tells me that they need to have a little bit more depth at that position, because a guy that they were expecting to have in Tommy Eichenberg is not available. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Again, news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, we got a deep dive into Gardner Minshew, what went into the decision, what he brings to the table, and how I kind of got an idea that he was going to be the guy. And this was before the game on Saturday versus Dallas Cowboys. All that's coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of our great sponsors, which is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're in the speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to deep dive into the conversation about Gardner Minshew being named the starting quarterback on Sunday by Antonio Pierce. Following the game on Saturday versus the Cowboys, he had mentioned to the media that, he was going to sit down and take a couple days to think about it, and him and Tom Telesco and also Luke Getsy were going to sit here and decide who the best guy for the job was. And then all of a sudden on Sunday, as soon as the press conference started, he opened it up talking about Gardner Minshew is the guy, as you heard in segment number 1. And I'll tell you right now, off top, I was surprised. I was surprised because when I left Allegiant Stadium, as I mentioned before, I thought that, okay, Aiden O'Connell is going to be the guy. Even though he threw that pick 6 in the game, I thought he was still going to be the guy as a starting quarterback, because I didn't think Gardner Minshew did anything Saturday to really separate himself and show why he should be the guy. But again, it wasn't about just the game. And I said that I was doing the pregame show and the postgame show, and following the game as I was doing the postgame show, I said, look, I know that it didn't look great for really either guy on Saturday against the Cowboys, but it was all about OTAs. It was all about mandatory minicamp. It was all about training camp, and it was about the games as well, whatever went into the decision. And so you heard Antonio Pierce say that it was multiple things that went into that decision, but ultimately Gardner Minshew is the guy. And what he was looking for the starting quarterback, what he told Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, consistency, command of the huddle, and most importantly, someone who will take care of the ball. So through two preseason games, Gardner Minshew didn't turn the ball over at all. Aiden O'Connell threw a pick 6 that was bad on Saturday. And I don't think that was the reason why Aiden O'Connell wasn't given the starting quarterback job. But what I noticed as I was doing the pregame show from the torch there at Allegiant Stadium right there on Coors Light Landing on Saturday, it was myself and Eddie Pascal. We were talking to Jason Horowitz, the voice of the Silver and Black, and he said, look, AP told us in our pre-game little meeting that they have, their production meeting, as they sit there and talk with the coaches so they can have, some information to talk about on the broadcast. He said that the starting quarterback needs to be someone who can help the Raiders get off to a fast start in the game and, more importantly, in the regular season. And it's funny, when he said that, I immediately told him, so to me, that sounds like he's talking about a veteran. Not a guy in year two, but a veteran, a guy who's been there, done that, someone who can get them off to a good start in the regular season. And Jason said, well, yeah, maybe that's a way to look at it, but there's another way to look at it. So he made it make sense where it still could have been Aiden O'Connell. But that really stood out to me. Someone who can help the Raiders get off to a fast start in the game and the regular season. Right? Antonio Pierce has talked about that earlier in the offseason. He said, look, we can't be in a position, and Devontae Adams said the same thing, we can't be in the position where at the end of the year, it's like, well, if you run the table, then you get into the playoffs. Right? And we remember that in 2023. Well, if they win the last 4 games, they can make it in. And it's funny that, the Raiders got eliminated from playoff contention last season by the Colts. And the Colts were quarterbacked by, at that time, Gardner Minshew. Right? And so it's wild that, Gardner Minshew has so many ties to the Raiders, and they were all about beating the Raiders last year with the Colts, and even the last year in Oakland when he was with the Jaguars and he beat the Raiders in the very last game that the Raiders ever played there, even though the officiating had a lot to do with that towards the end. But it was just wild that Gardner Minshew has, so many ties with the silver and black. And so, the fact that he said get him off to a hot start and get him off to a good start, to me, that screamed a veteran quarterback. That screamed to me as a guy that's been there, done that, knows how to get it done. And yeah, it might not be pleasing to the eyes all the time. It might not be sexy all the time, but it knows how to get it done, as opposed to a quarterback that probably has a lot more upside than the veteran does, but it's still kind of a wild card where you really don't know what he's going to bring to the table. And he's a little bit inconsistent at times. And again, after the performance on Saturday, I left Allegiant Stadium thinking Aiden O'Connell was going to be the guy. Hell, I went into training camp. As you know, on this show, I talked about it so many times. Went into Costa Mesa thinking Aiden O'Connell was going to be the guy, no doubt about it. All he had to do was go out there and show that he's the man, kind of rubber stamp that he's the man, and he never did that. So that kind of gave Gardner Minshew, more like a better leg up in this competition. And then ultimately, and I talked about it quite a bit against after the Minnesota game, just the way that he's able to use his legs. And I know everybody doesn't want to hear about a mobile quarterback or running quarterbacks don't do this. A guy that runs doesn't do that. And, what's the last quarterback that won? I get it, right? There's been a lot of people that have poo-pooed on that conversation about a guy that can move. I do think that matters, and I've talked about it on this show, right? What's going to be the ultimate decision maker, right? Is it a guy who can get out of harm's way when it's there? Or is it a guy that's going to stand tall in the pocket and deliver the ball down the field? Like, what do you prefer? And when I say you, I mean the Raiders as an organization, from the head coach to the front office to obviously the coaches on the staff. And they made the decision that a guy that can move around. And you see that with Minshew. And sometimes he leaves the pocket too soon. Right, I've talked about him rolling out to the right so much because he does, right? That's been pointed out on the broadcast from Matt Millen. He pointed it out in a great way. He did roll out to the left a little bit on Saturday versus the Cowboys, but it's just sometimes he gets a little, feet happy, I should say, and starts to roll out a little sooner than he has to. Sometimes he's got to see it and just deliver the ball. And there was times on Saturday that he could deliver the ball down the field for a big play, and he chose not to do it. And he just rolled out and either tried to hit somebody underneath or whatnot. So, as I mentioned before, both quarterbacks have warts, but, ultimately the guy that can move around a little bit is what, AP went with. And the guy that's been there, done that, the veteran, is what AP went with. And it's not about feeling good. It's not about the Raider way. It's not about, bringing the culture around and making the locker room feel good. Now it's all about winning games. So, that's one of the main things is like this guy is a veteran. He got the Colts right there on the doorstep of getting into the playoffs. A running back drops the ball. If it wasn't for that, they make the playoffs in 2023. So, he has the ability. So I know a lot of Raider Nation is like, I'm done with this team. I have people tweet at me, well, I'm done. I'm not watching the game. And look, that's your decision. You got to do what you got to do for you. One, I don't need you to call me and text me and tweet at me and tell me that you're not going to listen to the show or you're not going to watch the game. That's fine. That's your decision. Right? That's you got to do what you got to do. And ultimately, most times you do anyway, right? You're going to watch anyway, and you're just being emotional, and that's fine. But, the Raiders feel like this guy gives them the best chance to win immediately. Aiden O'Connell probably will play this year, and he'll probably, still have an opportunity to start for this team at some point. But right now, in Antonio Pierce's mind, Gardner Minshew gives him the best shot. So, there's a lot that he's got to prove. He really has to. I mean, he went out there and he made a nice throw down the field to Trey Tucker on Saturday against the Cowboys. Thought that was really good. And Trey Tucker's looking good. DJ Turner looked really good on Saturday as far as I was concerned. But, there wasn't a whole lot to write home about that. It was like, oh, man, that was a fantastic performance. Again, there was nothing that I saw from Gardner Minshew on Saturday that made me think there's no doubt about it. He's going to be the starting quarterback. But it wasn't just that game. So, look, now that the starting quarterback's been named, it's not about if this guy is a quarterback or that guy's a quarterback. Now we know who the guy is. At least right now, we know who the guy is. So now it's about getting behind him, hoping that Luke Getsy can design this offense to get the most out of him, and he can get the most out of the playmakers that he has around him. Remember on Saturday, the Raiders offense looked pretty lackluster. They also didn't have, Brock Bowers. He wasn't out there. Devontae Adams wasn't out there. So that's, there was no 12 personnel, which is what the Raiders are going to hang their hat on all season long. None of that was on display. So it was a little bit different style of offense. I didn't feel like that there was any real rhyme or reason to, the offensive play calling. As much as I felt confident about the offensive play calling after the first preseason game against the Vikings, I left scratching my head after, the Cowboys game, week 2. I thought, well, what the hell? What was all that? But again, there was some different factors that went into that. So, it is what it is with the preseason, right? I mean, that you're not going to see the whole playbook. You're not going to see it, wide open. They're going to have to, kind of vanilla it down, dumb it down a little bit just to, get through the preseason. Coming up on Friday against the Niners, we're not going to see anything. AP's already said none of the starters are going to play. So it's going to be a pretty, I think, just to be honest about it, probably a boring game on Friday, right? No starters. There's no competition as far as who the starting quarterback is going to be. That decision's already been made. So, it's going to be fun to be there, be a part of the pre and post game shows I've done all preseason long, right? That'll be awesome. Being in the Legion Stadium will be great, but, it's just going to be a game. It's going to be a game, and hopefully they just get through it healthy and get on to the regular season, get ready for the Chargers in week 1 at SoFi, and then go to Baltimore week 2 versus the Baltimore Ravens before they return home week 3 and have their season home opener against the Carolina Panthers. But Gardner Minshew is the guy. AP has made that announcement. He goes with the veteran. He goes with the guy with experience. He goes with the guy that could be a spark, as he mentioned, and he told Jason Horowitz that he wants a guy that can get them off to a hot start, not just in games, but also in the regular season, right? They can't just try to all of a sudden late in the season try to come back and run off 4 or 5 wins in a row to make the playoffs. They got to get off to a hot start, and they've got some tough teams coming up immediately, and he goes with a guy that has a little bit of mobility that can get out of harm's way, when the pressure's around him, and can move the pocket and run to pick up a first down. Something that stood out to me, and against the Minnesota game, right? It's something I talked about on here on the show. Like, hey, in the Minnesota Vikings game, he picks up that third down. He picks up first down on 3rd and 7. He picks it up with his feet. And then later he's able to throw that touchdown pass to DJ Turner without picking up that first down on the ground with his legs. They don't have that touchdown. So that was something that stood out to me in a major way, and kind of felt like after that game, it was in Gardner Minshew's corner. Like, okay, he might be leading this competition right now. There was a point in training camp where I felt like he was leading the competition as well, but nobody ever just took it and ran with it, right? And then after what we saw on Saturday, I was just like, I don't know. And everybody I talked to, from Lincoln Kennedy to Eric Allen, JT, Vinny, all of us all thought that, okay, and Vic Hafer, right? Like, everybody I talked to on Saturday in the Legion Stadium's press box all felt like, okay, Aiden O'Connell's going to be the guy, and Gardner Minshew is going to be, the backup and be a spark when needed. Okay, he's going to come into the game. But AP and the Raiders coaching staff and GM Tom Telesco all decided that Gardner Minshew was the guy. So Raider Nation, get behind your quarterback. 2024 season is right around the corner. Your calls and texts are coming up next. What do you think? 707-654-4693. We'll get to that right after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. You've heard me talk about FanDuel a lot. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, they have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV, only by betting $5. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook, which is FanDuel. Check it out, FanDuel.com. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Start off with a call from Lodi Cali Raider. He's calling to talk or ask about Minshew being named the starter. Here he is, Lodi Cali Raider.
What up, Q? Lodi Cali Raider here to talk about a little bit of the quarterback situation. So we go with Minshew. So give me your thoughts. Is it because the lesser performance on the left side that are playing right there, so they need more of a mobile quarterback? I don't know, man. I mean, he didn't have a great preseason. You know, he wasn't extremely accurate. So, anyways, crossing our fingers for a miracle. Maybe number 12 comes out of retirement. It helps us out. Give me your thoughts, Q. You're my boy. Lodi Cali Raider, out.
Lodi Cali Raider, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. And I think there are many factors that went into the decision. I talked about in segment number 2, mobility definitely played a role, in my opinion, but also a team trying to get off to a good start, right? That was something that really stood out to me. When Jason Horowitz told me that on the pregame show, it was me and Eddie Pascal. As soon as he said that, I immediately fired back and said, well, to me, that sounds like the veteran. I immediately said that. You can go back and check the tape, right? It's out there. I mean, that was the first thing I said. And Jason said, well, you know, there's a couple different things that go into that. But that was my first thought. As soon as he said a guy who can get the team off to a good start, a fast start in the regular season and also in games, I immediately thought of the veteran, Gardner Minshew. But then he went on to play the game on Saturday, and I thought, yeah, maybe not. So there's that. Again, I've gone back and forth so much on the quarterback position, but at least we know now who the starting quarterback is going to be in Gardner Minshew. Thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Jessica in the Bay. So what's up, Q? I'm sure you're getting a bunch of upset calls and texts today, so I wanted to offer a different perspective. Take a deep breath, Raider Nation. If you're upset about the choice, the staff never wanted the competition to go down like this. They gave every possible opportunity for one of the two to run away with the job, but nobody ever stepped up. Everyone wanted more from O'Connell, but Q and every other reporter has been saying from day one of camp, neither quarterback has looked great. You don't perform in practice like a Jimmy G and play on game day like Brady. You practice like you play. Either way, either quarterback would have a hell of a time trying to hold on to this job, and you're more than likely to see both quarterbacks this season. Whether Minshew loses the job or gets hurt, O'Connell in all likelihood will see the field. The situation will work itself out throughout the course of the season. Go Raiders. That's Jessica from the Bay. Great way to sum it up. I probably should have used that in segment number 2. I probably should have used that to summarize the whole conversation about the quarterback position, because nobody ever did take it. And Antonio Pierce was kind of upset about that. He mentioned that on Friday, or on Saturday, I should say, after the game, that no quarterback ever just went out there and grabbed the job. Like, this is my job. I thought going into training camp, Aiden O'Connell was going to go in there and just, no doubt about it, just solidify that he was a starting quarterback. Like, okay, it was just going to be basically check the box. He was the leader in the clubhouse going into Costa Mesa, and coming out, it was like, wait, hold on, what's going on? Neither quarterback stepped up and really ran away with the job. They just didn't. They left the door open for either guy. And O'Connell, I was really disappointed in, because I just knew that he was going to do that, take the bull by the horns, as Antonio Pierce said, but it never happened. So that's why, ultimately, like Jessica said, that's why he ended up with Gardner Minshew as a decision. And she said it right. There's a good chance that both quarterbacks will play this season. There's no doubt about that. Great text. Thanks so much for that. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider X. He's calling to talk about the decision to go with Minshew at the quarterback spot, but also wants to talk about the concerns with the team in general. Here he is, Raider X.
Hey, Q, this is Raider X. Just wanted to voice and get some feedback about the quarterback decision for the Raiders going with Minshew, and also just get your thoughts as we start wrapping up the second week of the preseason. Some of my concerns and some of my thoughts. I think the defense overall is looking pretty fierce, and also the offense, we haven't really seen the whole complementary stuff going out there right now. But I have some concerns. I mean, I understand going with Minshew because of just they both look the same. Pretty much ups and downs, nothing that just overwhelms anybody, but due to the inconsistency of that line and just giving you a little bit more hope, I think Minshew does it. Hopefully, we don't see O'Connell in there for an injury, or it just kind of all goes sideways this season. But the defense is what concerns me, because again, it's a very, very remarkable defense, but it's thin. Second string and third string are the backups. It scares me, and I think that the run game is really concerning. I'd like to get your feedback because what I've seen since the first game and the second game, that run defense is really concerning. I'd like to see your feedback and know what you suggest is gonna help that. I don't know if it's the linebackers or just the scheme. I'd like to see how they're going to fix that. This is Raider X out.
Raider X, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And, man, as much as we've been talking about the quarterback, I'm glad you brought up the run defense, right? I mean, we talked about it in segment number 1. You heard AP talk about it in segment number 1, but that run defense is a big concern of mine. It really is. That was one of my biggest keys. I talked about it in Friday's show, talked about it on the pregame show, talked about it on the postgame show, talked about it all week on RaiderNation Radio 920. Like, this defense is supposed to lead the team. If they're giving up $150 in rushing yards every game, guess what they're not going to do? Not going to win very many games, right? You can get to the quarterback all you want. You can have Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, John Jenkins. You can have a Malcolm Kuntz. You can have a Tyree Wilson. You can have an Adam Butler. All those guys trying to get at the quarterback, that's fine. If you can't stop the run, it doesn't matter. None of that's going to matter. And for 2 teams 2 weeks in a row to be able to get off and just run no matter what they want to do, that is a big concern of mine, a huge concern of mine. So I'm glad you brought that up. They've got to figure out how to clean that up before week 1. They got the Chargers who want to run the ball with Jim Harbaugh. We know that. And they got the Ravens. Lamar's going to run. Derrick Henry's going to run. The Ravens want to run. Yes, Lamar can throw the ball. He's got an arm. There's no doubt about that. He's got accuracy. There's no doubt about that. But they butter their bread by the ground game. If they can't stop the run, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter who the Raiders quarterback's going to be. If the defense can't stop the run, they're going to lose a ton of games this year. Just straight up. They'll be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft in 2024 if they can't stop, or 2025 if they can't stop the run. It's just that simple. I go back to the year where the Raiders defense was really good. Their pass defense was really good. Like, they were ranked number 1 in the league, but they could never stop the run. So it's kind of a skewed number because nobody ever passed against them. They just ran. This is when, like, LT was going off for like 400 yards a game for the Chargers on the ground. Like, nobody had to throw the ball that much because the Raiders couldn't stop the run. If they can't stop the run, they're in a world of hurt. That's got to get cleaned up. Patrick Graham, Rob Leonard, Antonio Pierce, Mike Caldwell, all those coaches got to figure out how this Raiders team could be a lot more stout when it comes to stopping the run as opposed to what they've done through 2 preseason games. But thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Michelle on the 951. Hey, Q, it's Michelle from the 951. I know it's preseason. We shouldn't be panicking quite yet, but the first-string Raiders did not look great next to the second- and third-string Cowgirls. The red zone issues continued. Both quarterbacks made problematic and dangerous throws. I know Minshew is a starter, but truly either guy could have won that battle. I'm hoping with 3 weeks of consistent quarterback 1 reps, consistency and familiarity will start to build. Hope everyone has a great week. Go Raiders. That's from Michelle in the 951. And, yeah, the red zone issues, right? I mean, the Raiders went for it on 4th down multiple times on Saturday against the Cowboys trying to get in the end zone. Couldn't do it, right? Even after a turnover, they were set up in great position. Couldn't do it. Had to settle for a field goal. Like, that is a problem. And that some of that's on Luke Getsy, some of that's on the play of the players on the field, right? Not being able to execute at the level that they're supposed to, right? And then the defense, right? Again, we just spent a lot of time talking about the run defense, but the defense didn't look great. And none of the Cowboys starters played. It was all, like you mentioned, second and third string guys, right? So for them to be out there and balling out the way they did against the Raiders starters, and the Raiders starters played for a long time. I had one guy mad when I pointed out. I was like, man, the Raiders starting defense is still out there except for the defensive line. I had a guy get mad at me about that. Why would you bring that up? That doesn't matter. No, it does. It does. That's the starting Raiders majority of their defense. And I know the defensive line is a big deal. I get that. But most of the starters are still out there, and the Cowboys don't have any of their starters out there, and they're balling. So, yeah, I'm sorry that I was the bearer of bad news, but that's what it was. So you're absolutely right. You know, the Raiders starters did not look great against the Cowboys second and third stringers. They got to get that cleaned up. They've got to figure that out. If this team's going to be led by the defense, like I've been saying all offseason long and all training camp long and all preseason long, it's got to be a whole hell of a lot better than it was. If not, again, they're in trouble, right? Big time trouble. I've been talking about this defense is going to be like top 5. Hell, it ain't going to be top 15 if they can't stop the run. So they've got to get that shored up quickly. But Michelle, thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Daniel. He's calling to talk about Minshew and why he's excited he's the starting quarterback for the Silver and Black. Here he is, Daniel.
Hey, Q, it's Daniel Friedman. I'm so excited we got Minshew Mania being the starting quarterback. He's just more mobile, and we're going against Chargers with the pass rush, like Bosa and Mack and, the Ravens coming up. And he's got more experience, and he's been able to deliver the deep pass to Trey Tucker. O'Connell, he's maybe a little more accurate, but he's not really hitting on the deep passes, not that I've seen. And plus he threw that pick six. So, Gardner Minshew, he's been a journeyman. He had like a Pro Bowl alternate season last year with the Colts. And with the weapons we have with Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, Michael Mayer, Jacoby Myers, it's going to be explosive. And Minshew's really great in the two tight end system. And I knew Getsy likes the guy who can run RPOs and be more mobile and stuff. So, didn't play the greatest game last against the Cowboys. A little missed on some of his throws, but it's going to happen sometimes. He's not going to be perfect. But all we can hope is that he'll get better and just keep moving forward. I think Aiden O'Connell will be a good backup in this league, because he's accurate and stuff, but he still needs some room for improvement and development. But I don't see Aiden O'Connell as a franchise quarterback. Minshew's a veteran with our great defense and our weapons. I think Minshew will get us further on. So that's my thoughts on that. Go Raiders. We gotta show up this run defense. If we're gonna have a chance to be a top 5 defense, we gotta show up the run defense. And that's something that we're gonna have to fix. Hopefully we get that done. But that's my only concern is the run defense. And hopefully we'll get, Colton Miller back here soon and JPJ. Cause I think JPJ is gonna be a great player. But that's my thoughts on that. Go Raiders. And have a good one.
Daniel, thanks for the call. I do appreciate you. And Minshew has the mobility, right? And for me, that does mean something. I talked about that following the Minnesota game. I thought that was something. I talked about that during, training camp. When I saw the Raiders defensive line getting after both O'Connell and Minshew, and I thought, man, to me, what I'm seeing is, the mobility means something. Having a little bit of wiggle, right? Being able to get out of harm's way, roll the pocket a little bit, keep plays alive a little bit, that does mean something. Now, sometimes he gets a little happy feet, right? And starts moving around a little bit quicker than he has to. He bails out of the pocket a little sooner than he has to. He's got to settle that down. But, at some point, that his ability to move around with his legs is going to help the team probably more than it's going to hurt the team. So that's definitely, one of the pluses, I think, with Gardner Minshew starting. And, again, the run D, real concern, right? I'm right there with you. I've talked about it, documented it multiple times on why it's a concern, but it's definitely a concern. So, Daniel, thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. We'll close things out with a text from Bill in the 301. It says, hey, Q, it's Bill in the 301. I just saw that Antonio Pierce and the Raiders named Gardner Minshew as a starting quarterback. I just want to say that I no longer question any of the predictions of the Raiders being a 5 to 6 win team. It's like they have a crystal ball and knew that the Raiders were going to find a way to make a decision that no one else agreed with. After listening to Rich Gannon's commentary during the game on Saturday night, I would love to hear his opinion on this decision. He has to be flabbergasted. I told you in a previous text, and I'll repeat it now, that I think AP has grossly mishandled his quarterback situation. Did AP even watch Gardner in last night's game? Any excitement that I have for the upcoming season is completely gone now. There hasn't been a single regular season game played yet, and most of the media that I see is already talking about next year's draft. This is not, I repeat, not what was supposed to happen this year. It's Bill in the 301. Thanks for the text. I appreciate it. And I think that's a little dramatic. I really do. And, not trying to be disrespectful. I just think that maybe you're going a little over the overboard. You're talking about he grossly, didn't play this quarterback competition out correctly. That wasn't your words. That was close to it, though. Would you say grossly mishandled the quarterback situation? I mean, the quarterback situation is what it was. You had Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. It's not like there was anything AP could have done to made, Jesus come through and be able to throw the ball. Like Jesus was going to be the quarterback. Like it's one of those two dudes. Like, that's what it was. Aiden O'Connell didn't take the job. It was there for him to take it. He didn't do it. Minshew didn't look great, but he's a veteran, been there, done that. And he said that they needed a guy that can get them off to a hot start. That's why I thought that Minshew could be the guy after I heard that on Saturday before the game. He didn't look great in the game, Gardner Minshew, that is. I get it. O'Connell looked okay. led the team on a nice 15-play drive, 7 minutes off the clock, got him in the end zone, but then he threw a pick six that was terrible. And one of the big things was taking care of the ball. So he threw the pick six. Minshew never had a interception. Either way, neither one of the guys I think is world beaters. I don't think that either one of the guys is the franchise quarterback moving forward for this team. They're just the starting quarterback right now. At some point, the Raiders are going to have to bite the bullet and figure out a way to go get their guy, whether that's spend a whole lot of money in free agency and get their guy, or give up a lot of draft capital, make some moves, and get up there and trade and go get their guy in the draft. Something that we talked about quite a bit this offseason. So I don't think AP mishandled the situation. I think he did the best he could with what he was dealt with. It's like you having $5 in your pocket. You got to make it work. That's all you had, right? It would be a lot easier to make things work with $20, but you didn't have $20. You had a $5 bill. So you do the best you can with it. It's not, if I go to a store and I bring back a couple items, I didn't mismanage my money. I only had $5 to begin with. That's what he's working with. Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew is the equivalent of $5. You want $20. I get it. I do too. But it's what it is. So, if the team wins 5 or 6 games, well, then they won't have to worry about trading up. They'll be in a position to draft their quarterback that they want, as so many teams got their starting quarterback this past year. 6 teams, think about it, 6 teams drafted quarterbacks in the first round, in the top 12 picks. So that means none of those teams need a starting quarterback. So even if they're bad this upcoming year, the Raiders will still be in a good position to get a top-notch quarterback in the draft, and I'm sure that they will, because even if these guys have a good season this year, O'Connell or Minshew, I still don't think that they're the long-term solution at the quarterback position. So I understand the frustrations, but season hasn't even started yet. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see what week 1 looks like before we talk about 5 or 6 wins. I don't really care what the national people say. They don't think the team's going to be good at all. And maybe they're right. Maybe we'll come back later and say, you know what, they did have that crystal ball that you talked about. And then maybe again we'll come back and say, you know what, 3 out of the last 4 years, the Raiders have hit the over when it comes to their win total, right? 6.5 is what it is this year. And guess what? They hit the over again. That could be a possibility. Let's let the games play out so we can decide. At least that's what I'm going to do. But you can choose to do whatever you want, and I do appreciate it. So, Bill, thanks for the text. As I mentioned always, definitely appreciate it. But that's all I got for today's show. Of course, there's plenty of calls and texts that we'll get to throughout the course of the week. I know a lot of folks will be talking about the quarterback spot, but not about the competition. Now talking about Gardner Minshew. We'll have more news and notes, and we'll have plenty of conversation as well when we reconvene coming up tomorrow. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.